Hello. This is probably one of the least formatted presentations of this conference. Apologies if you like big picture-y things upon the screen above me. You're not going to get it here. This is actually two little presentations, so you get twice as much for your money. First one is about two words that I think we see a lot in this ecosystem that I want to explore a little with you, in the hope that in the future we'll see clearer usage of these terms. I think they're very important. I was reading a website yesterday, and it's a website of a prominent project that launched recently. It's called, let's not name names. Anyway, on the website, it had a sentence: Bitcoin is the most secure and trusted blockchain in the world today. It piqued my ears. Why? Because it used Bitcoin in the same sentence as trusted. And I want to make sure that we understand the same thing with this term. So what's trust and what's truth? If you look at them in the dictionaries, trust is really a way of describing a relationship between people or between people organizations. Synonyms include faith and belief. Truth, on the other hand, is quite different. Truth is about something objective and universal, something that if we explain to somebody rational, that they will accept. You know, you talk about things like scientific truths, synonyms like facts. So they're quite different things. Now, I think they're actually comparable in many regards. Now, trust is sort of this belief that somebody else or some other set of people are basically going to act in a way that we expect, generally benevolently. Generally, the way that we expect them to when we trust them is to act in our interests, or at least not against our interests. Truth, on the other hand, is sort of taking matters into your own hand. Right? With truth, it's all about interacting with the world directly, either by observing the world, trying to gather evidence, verification, rationale, use rationality, critical rationalism in order to work out what's really there. In some sense, you can see both of these as ways of getting things done, opposite ways of getting things done. And cryptoeconomics, or economics in general, really, are just trying to get rid of trust, trying to avoid having to trust that people will work in some particular stated way, and rather generate principles and models and axioms in order to work out on the wider scale how people will sort of, when clumped together, what will be the emergent effect of whatever sort of system it is that they're brought together in. In some sense, it's trying to create systems created of sort of individuals that we don't really kind of know or understand particularly well on an individual level, but create systems such that it doesn't matter, that we don't actually need to trust them because we have a system that sort of guarantees certain outcomes. So when we talk about trust minimization and trustlessness, or trust freedom, it's what we're talking about are systems that work correctly regardless of the need to trust, regardless of whether any specific individual that's forming part of the system, or generally up until some minority of individuals, whether or not they act benevolently, or indeed maliciously or Byzantine. And the reason that we can be confident is because we draw upon these accepted principles and rules and so on. On the other hand, trust-bound or trusted is the opposite. It's systems that don't work, that don't proceed correctly unless everyone or roughly speaking, everyone, actually behaves as we expect in some benevolent manner. Oftentimes, when we talk about trusted systems, we don't get much choice over which systems or which components of the system we are allowed to trust. By and large, we don't really want to trust things that we don't know. A lot of times, things are forced upon us. Governments, for a start. Institutions, large corporations, Facebook. And oftentimes, there is no sort of direct point of contact with these things that we are being essentially forced or at least coerced to trust. There's very little way of actually verifying that they're doing the job that they're stating that they are doing. And if they do misbehave, I don't know if anyone's ever sort of had an attempt to get PayPal to do something to return money or generally fix its shit. But it's very difficult, bordering on impossible, because their misbehavior doesn't need to be addressed. They don't feel the need to address it. They're in such a position of control. Now, what does trustworthy mean? And this is the one that I'm still grappling with. I'm not quite sure whether trustworthy means, well, we have a really good rational reason to trust somebody, and therefore it's not really trust, because, there is evidence, there is something objective and universal. It's more like truth. Or whether it's just something that we say to ourselves to make ourselves feel better about having to trust somebody. I'm not sure which it is. I will say that no system is truly trust-free. Yeah? We can get close. As we draw upon more evidence and rationality, et cetera, we can get close to trust freedom. You might argue that some of the most basic elements of mathematics are sort of trust-free because you can prove them. Perhaps. But by and large, all systems require us to trust something or someone to some at least small degree. Bitcoin, for example, unless you are willing to go through every line of code and of not just Bitcoin, but also all of the various compilers and peripheral bits, unless you're willing to go through crypto, read all the various papers on crypto, and generally educate yourself to the point that would require probably, I don't know, there's probably only like a dozen people in the world that could possibly claim to have an end-to-end 100% truly trust-minimized knowledge of Bitcoin. Unless you're willing to do that, then you cannot claim Bitcoin is even approaching trust-free. But similarly, no system is like 100% trust-bound either, though I think religion comes pretty close to that. Religion sort of basing itself on faith, basing itself on trust, largely blind trust probably, is pretty close. You can draw a line between the two. Religion, I think, reasonably on one end, math, science on the other end, crypto maybe spanning somewhere between the middle and towards the truth end, depending precisely on its crypto-economic foundations. I think it's worth being aware of these two terms and worth really, as practitioners in this space, understanding whether a particular technology is trusted and should contain trust in its description, or in fact, truthful, in inverted quotes, in that it's based on actual accepted principles and models that mean you don't have to trust very many people that make this particular system happen. Next little talk, and it's going to be a quick one, is on governance. So governance is a bit of a sort of hot topic. It's something that's been developing for the last year or two in blockchain. And it's one of the things that Polkadot is really sort of trying to push forward. That's the project I work on, in case you don't know. And I just want to talk about why I'm bothering to work on governance. It's still like something that isn't particularly heavily, I don't know. I don't see 100% support for it, so here's my pitch to you. Firstly, evolvability of a platform. Platforms have to evolve. Products have to evolve. If you look today, you buy a pair of headphones, I bought a pair of headphones a couple of years ago. I very quickly installed the app. The app tells me you've got to upgrade your headphones. My headphones are just going to get a noise reduction, like active noise cancellation. They put a microphone in, they didn't bother doing the software for it. The software gets delivered a year later. Products these days upgrade. Software products obviously tend to upgrade, right? It's continuous, like, hey, do you want to install this update? Well, blockchain is a software product. It really needs to upgrade. The problem with blockchain is it's decentralized. How do you decide what the upgrade is? How do you decide when the upgrade should happen? It's all very well saying, right, well, version 1 to version 2, let's do an upgrade, but you actually have to work out what version 2 should be before you can actually make the upgrade. Some blockchain systems, particularly the sort of very heavily, widely adopted ones, find it very difficult to decide on what that version 2 should be. To the point that they actually have burst apart and split into several different versions of themselves, as though, some sort of crazy quantum experiment. Governance is a way of avoiding that sort of crazy quantum behavior and actually keeping something in a single box, avoiding that schism. You can decide what version 2 really should be. Second point. It is my view that decentralized cryptoeconomic systems, things that we call blockchains and cryptocurrencies now, that will evolve inevitably in the future, will become things very much like nation states in the future. What do I mean by nation states? I mean they will have more than a currency. If you think already, cryptocurrencies don't just have a currency, they have a defense program. What do I mean by defense program? I mean the miners. The miners provide defense against attackers to that chain. Yeah? They build a sort of wall. A wall of hash power, perhaps, a wall of stake, perhaps, but nonetheless a wall, and they maintain that wall. And they are paid, in most blockchains, by inflation. Blockchains are, in some sense, a true fiat currency, in that their governance mechanism, rather static as it is minting currency to pay for a defense program. In the future, it will not be so static because governance will come along and work out maybe we want to mint for other things. Governance, nonetheless, in the terms of crypto-economic systems becoming kind of like nation states, well, they need to interact with other things outside of their little bubble. They have to interact with other nation states for a start. Things that they might want to do, in all sorts, trade agreements, bridges, perhaps even mergers and acquisitions. There are all sorts of ways that we can sort of conceptualize this. Final point. Following on from the nation states idea. Blockchains these days tend to control, at least cryptocurrency blockchains, tend to control a relatively large amount of value. The big ones, well, the big one, hundreds of billions. The small ones, tens of billions or billions. By any stretch of the imagination, this is a lot of spending power. At the moment, it's generally spent on defense alone. Yeah? There are one or two exceptions, Dash, for example, but by and large, this huge market cap, this huge amount of value that is controlled by this logical system is mostly dipped into, mostly inflated in order to pay for the defense of the system as a whole. In the future, it will be for more than defense. There is no fundamental distinction between defending yourself and making yourself better. Both of them are mere examples of how to continue one's existence. Yeah? Like, we're used to the idea of biological entities fighting for existence, existential threats, defending themselves if an attacker comes, but also feeding themselves, also making themselves stronger and better, having children, I don't know, whatever else. It's all a struggle for existence, and blockchains will already have that same struggle. Governance is a means of allowing them to continue the struggle in a more efficient and optimum framework than without governance. In some sense, governance breathes this kind of life into a relatively static, immovable object. So when it does, watch out for the big rock monster, because it might come and get you. Cheers!